Security dragged Black CEO off a flight minutes later. She cut the airline's $9, 9B Lifeline. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get her off the plane. People like her always cause trouble. The words didn't just echo through the departure hall, they detonated. Passengers froze mid-stride. The rolling wheels of luggage stuttered to silence. A flock of phones rose instantly, black rectangles glinting under the airport lights like predators catching the scent of blood. And there she stood. A woman in a fitted burnt orange dress, posture steady, eyes forward, her phone pressed calmly to her ear, not shaking, not shouting, just still, too still for the chaos closing around her. 4 security officers formed a rough circle around her, 3 men in white airport enforcement uniforms and 1 woman in a navy suit, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. The woman in the suit jabbed her finger toward the black woman's shoulder as if pointing out a defect in a shipment. "She's been warned already," the woman barked, voice slicing the air. "Remove her, now, before she delays the whole flight." A few feet away, a businessman muttered loudly, exactly loud enough for his voice to be caught on a dozen recording phones pointed their way. "This is why they shouldn't be in first class. You just cost the airline $4. $9 billion. Lady, hope it was worth it." The crowd reacted like a single creature. Gasps, nervous laughter, quick shifting smirks. Someone zoomed in. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another whispered, "What did she do?" No one actually knew, but humiliation is a sport that plays well in public arenas. She finally lifted her eyes, and the moment she did, the corridor changed temperature. It wasn't anger in her gaze. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even humiliation. It was calculation. Cold, exact, measured. The kind of look a surgeon gives a tumor before cutting it out. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. The woman in the orange dress lowered her phone just an inch enough that anyone paying close attention could see the screen still glowed with an active call. She wasn't recording. She wasn't calling for help. She wasn't calling a lawyer. She was giving an order. The officer reached for her arm. That was when she spoke softly. So softly the microphones of the passengers' phones almost missed it. "Before you touch me," she said, "I need to finish this call." The woman in the navy suit scoffed loudly. "Finish it on the curb. She's a disruption. Drag her if you have to." But she didn't get to finish her sentence. Because the woman in the orange dress, the one being treated like an intruder in a place she had every right to be, finally spoke into her phone. Her voice steady, her tone quiet, her words lethal. "Confirm the withdrawal," she said. "All of it." A pause. A man's voice faintly responded from the other end. "All 9.9 billion, Mom." Her eyes never left the woman who had pointed at her like she was a stain. "Yes," she replied. "Every cent." A tremor ran through the air, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, like the ripple before an earthquake. The woman in the navy suit blinked. "What did you just—" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply hung up the call and slid the phone into her clutch. 30 feet away, a TV screen at the gate flickered, momentarily glitching. Behind her, the officers shifted uneasily, no longer sure if they were escorting a problem or provoking something far bigger. The recording passengers leaned closer, now sensing something was wrong, not with her, but with the situation they were witnessing. Something had snapped. They could feel it, even if they didn't understand it. And the woman in the orange dress finally lifted her chin, meeting the eyes of every stranger who had judged her without context. They thought she was powerless. They thought she was cornered. They thought she was alone. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. Because in 20 minutes, the airline that dared to humiliate her would lose the financial lifeline keeping it alive, and every person in that hallway would remember the moment when a single woman stood still and an empire fell. For a moment, the airport corridor held its breath. Not the passengers, not the officers, not even the furious manager still pointing at her as if authority were something you could weaponize with a gesture. No, the space itself seemed to pause. Like it recognized the shift before any human ego could catch up. The officer nearest her cleared his throat, trying to regain control of a scene he no longer understood. "Mom, we still need you to come with us. Orders from the airline. Orders." That word lingered, thin and fragile. She finally moved, just a tilt of her head, slow and deliberate. "Who gave the order?" she asked. The manager in the navy suit snapped back instantly. "I did, and I don't need to explain myself to you." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who believed the badge beside her title made her untouchable. The woman in the orange dress didn't flinch. "On what grounds?" "That's irrelevant," the manager shot back. "You're being non-compliant, disruptive," and a man behind them muttered, "Yeah, she's making a scene." Another added, "She looks dangerous." Dangerous? She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't moved her hands. She hadn't stepped out of line. But for some people, a calm black woman with dignity was a greater threat than any weapon. A ripple of discomfort moved through the officers. They weren't sure how to proceed. Nothing about her presence matched the accusations being hurled at her like darts. The youngest officer glanced at the manager. "Did she actually do anything?" The manager's glare hardened. "She doesn't need to. Trust me, I know the type." The type. Those two words changed the temperature more than any air conditioning system could. Even a few passengers lowered their phones, suddenly aware they were watching something that had nothing to do with aviation protocol. The woman in the orange dress finally inhaled a slow, steady breath, as if she were absorbing the tension molecule by molecule. Then she said, "You want me removed because you assumed I didn't belong in first class. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together." The woman in the orange dress didn't smile, nor did she gloat. She simply watched the manager's confidence drain away like water slipping through cracked stone. A father at the back of the crowd lowered his phone slowly. Wait, didn't she just say something about withdrawal on her call? His teenage daughter nudged him. "Dad, I think that was her." The whispers spread like sparks across dry grass. The youngest officer swallowed hard. "Mom, should we still escort you out?" Finally, she looked directly at him. "Escort me?" she said softly. "No, you're going to walk with me." "Where?" he asked. She stepped forward, the crowd parting instinctively. "To the airline office," she said. "They've just created an emergency. I'm going to explain exactly who caused it." The manager stumbled back a step, panic flickering behind her eyes. Because in that moment, she finally realized this wasn't a passenger she could intimidate. This wasn't a woman she could bully. This wasn't a problem she could escalate to security. This was the one person the entire airline should have treated with reverence. And the only person they absolutely should never have humiliated. The woman in the orange dress continued walking, each step echoing like a countdown. 20 minutes ago, they dragged her off a plane. Now, the ground beneath their billion-dollar empire had begun to crack. The walk to the airline's operations office felt nothing like an escort. It felt like a procession. Passengers cleared the path without being asked. Phones still recorded, but quieter now, not hunting for scandal, but witnessing one unfold in real time. Even the officers' footsteps softened, as if aware their authority had shrunk to the size of an apology they weren't ready to give. The manager in the navy suit hurried ahead, her heels clicking too fast, too loud. A sound born of panic disguised as professionalism. She reached the frosted glass door of the operations suite and pushed it open with a trembling hand. Inside, the room buzzed with the frantic energy of a system cracking under pressure. 3 supervisors hovered around a large screen displaying stock fluctuations. A red line plunged downward like a plane losing altitude. One of them muttered, "This can't be real. How did we lose 9% in 15 minutes?" Another snapped, Check the funding accounts, something's been withdrawn. The manager straightened her blazer and forced her voice into a brittle register. Everyone, eyes up, we're handling a situation. All heads turned. The woman in the orange dress stepped inside. Her presence changed the lighting. Not literally, but perception made it feel that way. The room dimmed around her and sharpened at her silhouette. One supervisor squinted. Isn't she the manager cut him off. A disruptive passenger, yes. We're clarifying her status. She emphasized the word disruptive like a shield she hoped would hold. It didn't, because the youngest officer, the only one with shame left in his eyes, spoke up. She wasn't disruptive, he said quietly. She never raised her voice. Not once. The room shifted again. Humiliation, once a weapon, now boomeranged back toward its owner. The manager snapped. Officer, that's not your place. Then she turned to the woman in the orange dress. Let's resolve this quickly. You were removed due to non-compliance after multiple. False, the woman interrupted. Not loud, not sharp, just certain. The supervisors watched like jurors. You approached me before I spoke, she continued. You pointed at me before I stood. And you called security before you understood anything at all, the manager sputtered. You people like you. And that was the slip, the condemning phrase, the quiet confession of prejudice. Silence fell so fast it felt like the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the room. One supervisor whispered, "Oh no." The woman in the orange dress walked to the center of the room, stopping before the main screen, the one displaying the airline's financial collapse in real time. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Finally, she spoke. Your funding collapse wasn't an accident. It was a trigger. The manager froze. A trigger? Yes. She gestured lightly toward the screen. Triggered by me. A wave of disbelief rolled through the supervisors. One stepped forward. Hold on. Who exactly are you? She turned her gaze toward him, calm, unwavering. Stratus Lift Capital, she said. Primary investor. I hold 19.7% of this airline, with authority to withdraw emergency capital at my discretion. The supervisor's face drained of color. 9.9 billion. That was you? Yes. And you withdrew it because I was dragged off my own flight, she replied. Because your staff saw my skin before they saw my ticket. And because dignity is not optional. The manager backed into the wall, eyes wide, voice cracking. We didn't know who you were. She finally looked at the woman who had pointed at her like a stain. That was your first mistake, she said. Assuming identity determines value. The second supervisor whispered, What's the protocol? Do we apologize? Do we call legal? The woman in the orange dress stepped closer to the screen, watching the stock line dip further, as if observing whether she had already predicted. This, she said quietly, is only the beginning. The room didn't breathe, because for the first time they understood. Their emergency wasn't the incident. It wasn't the removal. It wasn't the passenger. The emergency was her. The operations room snapped into a frantic rustle the moment her words settled, a rustle of keyboards, whispered curses, and half-formed questions swallowed before they fully escaped. But she didn't move. She simply watched the chaos she had triggered, the way a conductor observes an orchestra that hasn't yet realized she's the one holding the baton. A senior supervisor, gray hair, badge-heavy with years, stepped forward cautiously. Mom, if you withdrew 9.9 billion, our liquidity buffers were never your safety net, she finished. They were a privilege extended, one you forfeited today. He swallowed, hard. Another supervisor stared at the cascading alerts on the screen. These accounts, they're locking, fuel contracts, leasing agreements, even the international cargo lanes, all contingent, she said, on investor stability. Which you just lost. The manager in the navy suit shook her head violently, refusing to accept the unraveling reality. This can't happen. You can't just pull everything. Not for something so small. The room flinched. So small? Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Being profiled is not small, she continued. Being ordered off a flight before I open my mouth is not small. Being reduced to a stereotype by someone trained to serve the public certainly not small. The manager shrank into her blazer. The senior supervisor cleared his throat again, softer this time. Is there anything we can do to reverse the withdrawal? Her eyes drifted to him, not unkind, but unbending. You reverse disrespect, she said, not consequences. Behind them, more red notifications flared across the screen. Credit line 3, A, expired contract 11, B, international fuel. Pending failure hedge fund backers. Requesting clarification. Market confidence index. Severe drop. A younger analyst raised her hand, voice small. Mom, your withdrawal triggered our debt covenants. Silence thickened. If the capital isn't restored, the airline won't meet regulatory liquidity by midnight. Midnight. Not a metaphor. A deadline. The woman in the orange dress stepped toward the long operations table. Her heels clicked, once a sound that seemed to puncture the room's last thread of composure. She placed her fingertips lightly on the table's edge. Then you begin emergency shutdown protocol, she said. Ground non-essential flights, freeze corporate spending, call your auditors, notify the Department of Transportation, and prepare a bankruptcy shield. The analysts stared at her. You already know the protocol? Someone whispered. I wrote part of it, she replied. The truth landed like a controlled detonation. The manager's mouth fell open. You expect us to believe you, but she didn't finish, because the woman in the orange dress tapped her phone once, and a new notification pulsed across the main screen, not from the airline system, but from an external regulatory portal. Stratusly IFT Capital formal notice issued investor action. Non-renewal plus retraction reason. Operational misconduct gasps filled the room. You filed a misconduct notice? The senior supervisor breathed. She nodded. That notice, he said slowly, forces government review. The FAA will be here in hours. Then you'd better clean your statements, she replied. The manager backed toward the wall, shaking her head, eyes wide as if hoping the drywall could swallow her whole. You're destroying us. No, the woman said softly. You destroyed yourselves when you decided who I was based on how I looked. The youngest officer shifted uncomfortably. Mom, what happens now? She turned to him, the only one who had questioned the injustice out loud. Now, she said. Now we proceed. She lifted her phone again. Execute phase 2, she said. Start the repurchase freeze. A voice on the other end responded immediately. Confirmation. Repurchase freeze active. Board notified. Press outlets alerted. The supervisors panicked as a fresh wave of alerts crashed across the screen. Investor confidence. Critical media flag. Trending airline meltdown board emergency. Meeting. 14 minutes. The woman in the orange dress lowered her phone. This, she said, is not revenge. Everyone stared at her. This, she continued, is accountability set to scale. And with that, she walked toward the door, each step measured, calm, inevitable. Behind her, the airline's operations center drowned in the sound of alarms. The countdown had begun. News doesn't always travel fast. But humiliation recorded on a phone? That travels at the speed of outrage. By the time she stepped out of the operations office and back into the terminal, the atmosphere had mutated. The curious whispers were gone. In their place, something sharper, something electric. Eyes followed her, but no longer with the easy arrogance of spectators watching a stranger being punished. Now they watched with something closer to caution or awe. A woman scrolling her phone gasped aloud. Oh my God, this is her. A college student beside her leaned over. That's the one from the video? They dragged her off and wait, she's the investor? No, the woman whispered, hand covering her mouth. She's the biggest investor. And that was the beginning of the narrative shift. A shift that every public scandal tries to outrun, but never can. The moment the audience switches sides. Just ahead, a large LED news ticker near the terminal ceiling flickered from weather updates to breaking coverage. CNBC live update. Funding withdrawal prompts sudden crisis at AirConnect Airlines source. Internal leak suggests investor retaliation linked to passenger mistreatment. Gasps rippled. Heads snapped toward her. Someone whispered, "She doesn't look angry." Another replied, "That's what scares me." As she walked, her phone vibrated again 3 times in rapid succession. Elena, CFO, Stratuslift, Capital. Media outlets requesting confirmation. Want us to deny for now? Compliance Director, Fay A issued inquiry. They want timeline. Legal. You're on every major feed. Prepare for statement drafting. She silenced the notifications. They could wait. Humiliation came fast. Accountability took its time. Behind her, the terminal screens updated yet again. Market flash. Air Connect stock falls 17% in under an hour, analysts. Investor disapproval on an unprecedented scale. A cluster of bystanders gathered around a TV mounted on a pillar. The live feed showed a split screen, one half displaying the plummeting stock line, the other showing freeze frames of her from the viral video, being surrounded by officers, being pointed at, being yelled at. A teenage boy spoke without turning away from the screen. I knew something felt off in that video. She wasn't resisting. She looked controlled. His father nodded. That's not someone causing trouble. That's someone calculating her next move. She kept walking. Because the real shift was happening off-camera in rooms where money spoke louder than news anchors. Across the city, boardrooms buzzed with frantic conference calls. Was this a misunderstanding? Who gave the removal order? How exposed are we to Stratuslift's capital? Is the FAA involved? Why didn't we recognize her? And then, the question that mattered most. How do we make this stop? But it was too late. Because viral momentum is a tide. Once it turns, it doesn't return gently, it erodes. She passed Gate 47 just as a cluster of airline staff whispered among themselves. One looked at her with a mixture of fear and respect, the expression of someone recognizing authority long after it's too late to course correct. Is that really her? A gate agent murmured. Yes, another said. And corporate just sent a message. Emergency board meeting. Mandatory attendance. What for? The agent swallowed. They think the airline might lose its license. A hush fell over them. She didn't break stride. She continued toward the far corridor, where security glass reflected her silhouette steady, composed, untouched by the chaos swirling behind her. Social media was already exploding. Number, she pulled 9B. Number, fly with respect. Number, airline accountability. Number, dignity is not optional. Thousands of comments stacked by the second, millions of views, and a slow, dawning realization across the internet. The woman they dragged off their plane wasn't a problem. She was the reckoning. Near the escalators, a reporter sprinted toward her, breathless, microphone in hand. Mom! Mom! Is it true you triggered the collapse? Are you willing to comment on the accusations? She glanced at him, expression unreadable. Accusations? She repeated softly. The truth is louder. He froze. The cameraman froze. Even the terminal seemed to hold still, because her calm wasn't just poise, it was prophecy. Behind her, another alert blasted across the TV. Air Connect Airline CEO requests direct meeting with primary investor. The passengers nearby stared at the screen, then at her. Because everyone now understood, this wasn't a corporate disagreement. This was the beginning of a historic fall, and the woman at the center of it walked forward with the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what the next chapter would bring. The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime, spilling her into the executive wing, a space designed to intimidate. Marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Frosted glass walls etched with the airline's legacy logos. A hallway so quiet it felt curated. But today, intimidation had nowhere to land. Every receptionist, every assistant, every mid-level manager she passed wore the same expression. They finally knew who she was. A man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped forward, posture rigid. His badge read, Chief Operating Officer. Mom, the board is asking that you wait in the lounge. The CEO will join you shortly. She stopped. Not abruptly, just enough to command stillness. No, she said. The COO blinked. Mom, I won't wait in a lounge. Her voice remained calm, but the air shifted. You asked for me. You created the emergency. I'm walking into the room now. He hesitated. The board isn't prepared. She held his gaze for one quiet beat. That, she said, is not my problem. She stepped past him. He didn't stop her. At the end of the corridor, double glass doors opened into the airline's command room, the brain of the entire operation. A long table stretched toward a high window overlooking the city, where storm clouds gathered like an omen. Around the table sat 12 board members. Not one of them was talking. All of them were waiting. The CEO stood at the head mid-50 seconds, silver hair swept back, suit crisp but wrinkled at the edges from stress. He tried to smile. It failed halfway. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We weren't expecting." She cut him off with a look, not rude, just final. "You dragged me off a plane," she said. "Surely you expected consequences." The CEO's throat tightened. "We didn't know who you were." "That," she replied, "is what created your problem." He gestured to the table. "Please, sit. We want to correct this." She didn't move. "The airline is facing catastrophic exposure," another board member said, sliding a financial report toward her. "If the withdrawal continues, our license may be suspended. We need to negotiate a solution, preferably quiet," she finished for him. "Preferably private. Preferably without acknowledging why this happened." A murmur broke across the table. The CEO placed his hands on the table, palms down. "We're prepared to issue a formal apology." She raised an eyebrow. "Does your apology restore the funding?" He shifted, uncomfortable. "That depends on your conditions." "My conditions?" she repeated, almost amused. She walked slowly toward the head of the table. Every eye tracked her, apprehensive, reverent, fearful. When she reached the CEO, she stopped just close enough to force him to look up at her. "Let's be clear," she said. "You didn't call me here to negotiate. You called me here because your empire is bleeding, and you don't know how to stop it." One board member bristled. "We have options. You have ours," she corrected. A tense silence followed. Finally, the CEO exhaled shakily. "Then tell us what you want." She placed both hands on the back of an empty chair, not to sit, but to anchor the room to her next words. "I want accountability. Real, structural accountability. Not PR statements, not diversity workshops, not token adjustments." Her eyes swept the table. "I want systemic correction for systemic disrespect." The COO swallowed. "Meaning?" "Meaning you don't get to mistreat the people who keep your company alive, financially or otherwise." The CEO straightened slightly, trying to reclaim authority. "If we agree to these changes, will you consider reinstating your capital?" She leaned in just slightly, enough that the entire board leaned back without realizing it. "You're asking the wrong question." The CEO's voice cracked. "Then what is the right one?" She let the silence sharpen the moment. "The right question," she said softly, "is whether your airline deserves a second chance." A collective breath caught. For the first time, the CEO looked genuinely afraid not of losing funding, but of losing something far larger: control. He opened his mouth to speak, but her phone vibrated. One glance at the screen. A single message. "Elena, Phase 3 ready. Press preparing live statements." The board saw the notification flash. Their faces drained. She locked the phone and looked at them once more. "You have 10 minutes," she said. "Then we proceed." She turned toward the door, leaving 12 people in a room built for power, now stripped of it. And as she walked away, the CEO finally understood. He wasn't facing a disgruntled investor. He was standing on the edge of an extinction-level event. When she re-entered the room, the board had rearranged themselves, not their seats, but their postures. Spines straighter, hands folded, eyes lowered. The CEO tried to greet her again, but the attempt died halfway. She didn't sit. She didn't need the chair. She stood at the head of the table, directly beneath the recessed lights, casting a long shadow down the polished surface. "These," she began, "are the terms. No theatrics, no preamble, just impact." "First," she said, "the manager who ordered my removal is terminated, effective today." No one argued. The manager wasn't present to defend herself, but even if she were, her defense would have drowned in the silence now tightening around the table. Second, mandatory bias and conduct retraining for every employee with operational authority, especially at points of passenger contact. The COO nodded quickly, too quickly. "We can implement that immediately," she continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Third, a public apology that names the wrongdoing without euphemisms." No incident, no miscommunication, no unfortunate misunderstanding. She let the words hang a moment. You will call it what it was: targeted profiling and misuse of authority. A few board members swallowed hard. The truth, spoken plainly, is always heavier than scandal. And fourth, she said, her voice cooling another degree, the creation of a permanent oversight council independent from your executive chain with authority to audit misconduct, discrimination complaints, and operational abuse. The CFO leaned forward, voice tight. That would give them power over internal governance. That, she cut in, is the point. Her gaze swept the table again, slow and unblinking. You do not correct a system by trusting the system to police itself. The CEO exhaled shakily. And if we accept these terms, you'll reinstate the funding? She held his eyes. The room stilled. You're still asking the wrong question, she said. A tremor of dread passed through the board. This isn't about restoring funding, she continued. This is about restoring integrity. If your airline proves it can hold itself accountable, you won't need me to save you. You'll earn the right to survive. A long, brittle silence followed. One board member finally whispered, and if we fail? She didn't answer immediately. She allowed the tension to fill every corner of the room until even the walls seemed to listen. Then she said, failure means collapse, not because I pulled 9.9 billion, her voice lowered, almost a whisper, but because you built an empire on a foundation too weak to withstand its own behavior. The CEO's composure cracked. His hands trembled against the table. He wasn't ready for consequences at this scale, consequences crafted with precision. A knock interrupted the moment. A junior assistant peeked in, face pale. Sir, the press is live. They're waiting for the statement. The board turned to her. She didn't smile. She didn't savor the power. She simply stepped back from the table. 10 minutes, she repeated. Your terms expire in 10 minutes. And with that, she walked out, leaving a dozen leaders staring at the ruins of their authority. Knowing the truth, she didn't come to negotiate. She came to redefine who deserved to remain in the sky. The press room was already boiling when she entered, cameras angled, microphones stacked like spears, reporters murmuring in fevered anticipation. The live stream counters on the overhead monitors climbed by the second. She didn't stand at the podium. She stood beside it, a subtle correction of hierarchy that every lens picked up immediately. The CEO approached the microphone, visibly rattled. The lights reflected off the sweat forming at his temples. He cleared his throat. Today, he began, our airline failed to uphold the standards of dignity and respect that every passenger deserves. A member of our staff. She tilted her head. He stopped. Cameras clicked. He tried again, voice tighter. Our staff engaged in discriminatory profiling and misuse of authority. That was the moment the oxygen left the room. He forced himself onward. On behalf of our entire leadership, we apologize directly to the investor and passenger we wronged. Effective immediately, disciplinary actions, structural oversight, and mandatory retraining programs will begin. This is not a press strategy. This is accountability. A reporter raised his hand sharply. Is it true the airline's collapse began after your mistreatment of her? The CEO hesitated. She answered instead. Yes. Every camera swung to her like planets pulled into orbit. She continued, voice calm, precise. What happened today wasn't about wealth or status. It was about dignity, something no one has the right to take from another person. The room froze around her words. Money didn't break this airline, she said. Behavior did. And that was the clip that would go viral before she even left the stage. Hours later, as dusk bled across the city skyline, she stepped out of the terminal and into the cooling evening air. The chaos had faded behind her, replaced by the quiet hum of a world recalibrating itself. Her phone buzzed again. Elena, press reaction positive. Oversight Council approved. Market stabilizing once news of reform spread. She typed only one word back. Good. Across the tarmac, an aircraft lifted into the amber sky, steady, unbroken, indifferent to the turmoil below. She watched it climb, its silhouette cutting through clouds with the certainty of a promise. A driver opened the car door for her. Where to, ma'am? She looked once more at the departing plane. Home, she said. There's work to do. As the car pulled away, she rested her hand against the window, feeling the vibration of another jet taking off, a reminder that flight, like dignity, isn't granted. It's earned. And today, the world had learned exactly who deserved to stay in the sky.